Today's sponsor is our longtime partner, Helix Sleep. Helix Sleep provides premium sleep products that are customized to your unique needs. They've got a revised Helix Sleep quiz that will assess and offer up the optimal sleep solutions just for you. It doesn't matter if you're a solo side sleeper who likes springy mattresses, or someone who shares a mattress, sleeps on their back, and likes their mattresses firm as heck. You've got unique sleep needs, and Helix Sleep is there looking out for you to find that perfect mattress. The mattress will come rolled up and is remarkably easy to set up even by yourself. And not only will Helix Sleep ship for free anywhere in the US and offers a 10-year warranty, but they also offer a 100-night sleep trial. So you get more than 3 months to make sure that you love your mattress. I've now had my Helix Sleep mattress for over 2 years now, and I love the damn thing. Heck, our general manager Frazier has had his for about 9 months now. Hey Frazier, how do you like it?
Slaps, totally slaps.
There you go. Save 20% off your Helix Sleep mattress today when you click the link in the box down below or go to helixsleep.com/thecompletionist. You'll even get 2 free pillows. Plus, Helix Sleep mattress offers financing options and flexible payment plans because they want to make sure that you get some good sleep, and the process of getting a good night's sleep is all going to be easy and breezy for you. So once again, if you're looking to get to sleep on a great mattress, go to helixsleep.com/thecompletionist today. Now, back to the show. In 2018, a new IP from Square Enix called Octopath Traveler introduced the world to HD 2D. These graphics are a modern interpretation of classic pixel art, and feel both nostalgic and forward-thinking. But Octopath is more than its art style. The entire game is a love letter to everything players love about the role-playing genre, but this is not some compact throwaway game. Octopath Traveler doubles down on some strange structural choices to become one of the most fascinating and frustrating RPGs I've ever completed. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another brand new episode of The Completionist, where we don't just beat the games, we complete them. I cut my teeth on Japanese RPGs growing up. The Final Fantasy series has always been a personal touchstone. I love losing myself in a vast, complicated story and getting to know a world inside and out. I knew that I was destined to complete Octopath Traveler one of these days. And that day is now. Octopath Traveler has a powerful draw for those who grew up in the heyday of JRPGs. It manages to evoke nostalgia even though it is a brand new IP. As someone who will always have an abiding love for this genre, and of course Square Enix, there is a lot to recommend. The music, the art style, much of the writing, and the incredible battle systems are all worth your time. But I give Octopath Traveler my completionist rating of Finish It. Octopath Traveler features some truly wild and, to me, disappointing structural issues. And though its endgame is a worthy challenge, getting there can be a slog. Let's begin.
Yes! All glory goes to the winner! Over. Wake up! Last one standing wins. KO!
Square Enix has always been an innovative company. They aim to push video games forward all the time, and even if they don't always revolutionize the industry, I'd say they have more hits than misses. It is astounding how much the publisher continues to raise the bar, especially with RPGs, even when they make some questionable missteps. Looking at you, Final Fantasy Pixel remasters. Some of them are good, some of them not good. Octopath Traveler is an example of the company throwing longtime fans a bone. Actually, more than a bone, a full-on feast. Part of the strength of Square Enix is their ability to develop multiple projects at the same time that still fall under the company's giant umbrella. Octopath Traveler was originally started by producers Tomoyo Asano and Masashi Takahashi, who helped develop Bravely Default and Bravely Second. Their experience showed that they could work within the framework of classic RPGs and expand them at the same time. I think the three pillars of most RPGs tend to be presentation, mechanics, and story. Octopath Traveler manages to wildly succeed lead in almost all three of these categories. This game is catnip for anyone who grew up playing classics like Final Fantasy VI or Chrono Trigger. The art style, which Square Enix coined as HD 2D, is completely gorgeous. It takes pixelated graphics to a whole new level. There is a combination of 16-bit style sprites and 3D environments. This game looks like how people my age remember games looking back in the day, you know? Towns and dungeons look like beautiful dioramas. Character sprites are consistently crisp, but the edges of the screen are always a little hazy. The entire game has this dreamlike quality to it. The soundtrack is another big draw, an incredible score with a ton of variety. From blood-pumping battle tunes to sweeping overworld music to incredible boss themes, every piece of the score is amazing. Mechanically speaking, Octopath Traveler features one of the densest RPG combat systems I've ever played. If you're doing a completionist run, every battle must be considered thoughtfully. Enemy weaknesses must be internalized. The game does not have an in-game bestiary, but it does keep track of weaknesses when in battle. There's a layer of strategy to even the simplest low-level random encounters. Factor in equipment, jobs, sub-jobs, the ability to boost attacks and spells, and the fact that every enemy has a shield that must be broken by exploiting vulnerabilities, and battles begin to feel like intricate puzzles to solve. Standard jrpg staples like experience points, equipment, and party management are here. There's a vast world map full of dungeons and towns to be explored. There are treasure chests to open, NPCs to chat with, and yes, party members to level up. Octopath puts its own spin on things that diehards will appreciate, but at its core, it's an absolutely maximalist turn-based RPG. Now, the story part of this three pillars thing that I arbitrarily structured this section around is where Octopath Traveler did, and still does receive most of its criticism, and I do agree. There are 8 main characters in the game, though you can only have 4 in your party at a time. Every character has their own backstory, unique NPCs they have relationships with, and their own special class and associated path actions that affects exploration. Okay, so far so good, right? Pretty standard RPG stuff. But for better or worse, this game takes an extremely hands-off approach to storytelling. All 8 characters barely interact with each other over the course of the game. Instead of one big overarching plot that weaves together every character like what you might expect from a Square Enix RPG, Octopath Traveler feels like a collection of short stories. At least until the very, very, very end of the game, where some characters and story arcs explicitly collide. If you go into Octopath Traveler knowing that it features disparate storytelling, the sting may be lessened for you. And Octopath Traveler is not the first to ever do this. In fact, in many ways, this game is a spiritual successor to the 1994 classic Live Alive. It also features a protagonist, and if you're playing the Switch remake, it also has HD 2D graphics. Live Alive, however, does not have the scope that Octopath offers. So every character has 4 chapters to clear, but even though the player can use any party member in any chapter once they've found them, each chapter is laser focused on the story of just one character. Almost every chapter follows pretty much the same structure. The main character of that chapter must go to a town, use their path action in some capacity, and fight through a dungeon to battle a boss. Party members are basically sliced off from one another outside of brief interstitial dialogue scenes called banter. These skits are the only moment where the group feels like an actual party. This structure isn't bad per se, but it is confounding. This disconnect is exacerbated by the fact that the first character the player chooses becomes the protagonist. The protagonist cannot be removed from your party until you complete their 4-chapter arc. Whichever character you start with also determines your position on the world map, which definitely has a big impact on the first 8 or 10 hours of gameplay, and the order in which you can get the other party members. There's something engaging here for sure. Pretty much every person who plays this game will have a different story to tell about how they moved throughout it, which is the very essence of role-playing. Completionists, i.e. me, might want a little more of a straight line here. Obviously, I had to complete all 4 chapters for each of the 8 characters, and of course, there are side stories to complete all throughout the game, simple fetch quests, and sometimes other activities involving path actions. But this barely scratches the surface of completion. Now, this game was exclusive to the Nintendo Switch when it first released, as the devs intended it to be completed in short bursts over a long period of time. But I completed this game on Steam. That means 88 achievements to collect. Now, most of these achievements are related to hitting story milestones in each chapter, but there are a handful of extremely annoying achievements. Some are simple but time-consuming, like playing the game for more than 100 hours. Some are completely missable, like find every hidden item. And then there are the bonkers requirements for speedrunning this massive RPG in under 8 hours. And then there's another achievement for clearing all 4 chapters for a character with only 1 party member. Look, these achievements sound scary on their own, but the main game has plenty of challenges to overcome too. There is naturally a final area that unlocks only after completing all 8 stories and a string of side quests. This area, the Ruins of Hornburg, is Octopath's equivalent to the Emerald Weapon super boss in Final Fantasy VII, or kind of really any post-game gauntlet. It's basically an intensely difficult boss rush that requires strategy, skill, and a dash of plain luck to overcome. Online strategy suggests combining the solo run and the speed run, so that's what I went with. So, completionists looking to complete this game are looking at a minimum of 2 playthroughs, and well over 100 hours of playtime. Did I mention that this game requires players to expose the weakness of every enemy? What I'm trying to say here is that the mountain is high, the incline is steep, and Octopath Traveler completion requirements are absolutely no joke. If you're hearing all of these completion requirements and having a mini panic attack, yeah, welcome to my f***ing club. It sounds like a lot, and it absolutely is. But there is a bright side here, because Octopath Traveler feels pretty damn good to actually play, and thank God that this game is utterly gorgeous to look at and listen to. Because if you're gonna complete it like I did, you're gonna be here for a long, long time. Octopath Traveler set a new standard for how a modern RPG could look, sound, and play. Square Enix innovated in the best way possible, creating an art style that I now want applied to basically every retro RPG I could think of. Its entire aesthetic is a throwback to times gone by. It is so affecting that even if completing the entirety of Octopath Traveler is something I don't recommend, you still have to see this game in action to believe it. The now famous HD 2D style is one of Octopath's most prominent features. It's the first thing people point to as a positive. It is hopefully here to stay, as Square Enix continues to develop new games in this style like 2022's Triangle Strategy, and remake older titles like Dragon Quest III in the same likeness. The striking pixel art and lush backgrounds are a powerful reminder that art direction is highly important when you're going to be spending a minimum of 9 hours completing a game. The inspiration of this art direction didn't come from out of nowhere either. In an interview with Eurogamer, Takahashi notes that we tried to make a game that brings us back to that time when we needed to imagine situations and emotions, but with a newer looking graphical aspect. Instead of pushing the limits of Nintendo's hardware like they had to with the Super Nintendo, Square Enix created a game that evokes an older style but would have been impossible with the technology of the 90s. I think even after all of these years, I still want to be transported back to how I felt playing a JRPG for the first time. HD 2D is visual shorthand that reminds us of the past. This game feels timeless, like the best kinds of pixel art always does. I think it's gorgeous, and if you think it's a crutch or it's being overused, I think you're wrong. I'll take this all the time, every day. The score also recalls the music of past RPGs. Composer Yasunori Nishiki made an effort to create original music that still felt incredibly nostalgic. The melodies call to mind old school JRPGs, now with the added depth of a live orchestra. The music is insane. The kind of stuff you don't mind hearing over and over as you endlessly grind for levels. I love the sprites and character designs of every party member and NPC. There is a ton of diversity in towns and dungeons, and the lighting effects when you're in a cave are particularly spectacular. The graphics make you feel cozy. Variety extends to enemy designs as well, though I definitely grew tired of every single variation by the time I finished exploiting all of their weaknesses. Even your basic rat person has a ton of personality, like how they wear a little loincloth or how variants carry little different weapons. Boss characters are massive, which I found hilarious. Another throwback trope to RPGs gone by. Even if the enemy sprite is a human the exact same size as your party member in the overworld, they'll balloon to be screen-filling monstrosities when the battle actually begins. I want to mention the map, which also is weirdly beautiful. It looks like a pirate treasure map or something from the Game of Thrones intro. Unlocking fast travel is as simple as visiting a major city once. Areas between cities are fairly easy to navigate, just keep an eye out for any directional signs. The presentation is overall very pleasing, but the voice acting can be pretty hit or miss. Octopath isn't fully voice acted. Major plot beats tend to have voiced dialogue, but other than that, characters mostly have little callouts they do during battle. These can get annoying pretty quickly. I love Primrose, but if I hear her say, "I'm ready," one more time, I might have to murder Ted. Sorry, Ted.
All good.
That said, I think the 8 main characters give solid performances. It's the side characters that can be distracting. So for example, Primrose's first chapter is very dark and serious, but the antagonist's performance, the old pervert Helganish, acts so over the top that it almost killed the drama and tension for me.
It's a shame, Primrose. You were always my favorite. What a waste.
You can always skip through these scenes if you don't click with how they sound, but I would have loved to have praised the VO as highly as the music and the graphics. Octopath Traveler could have been propped up by its art direction alone. Fortunately, the rest of the game has some meat on its bones too. Characters are the engine that drive Octopath Traveler forward. Completionists have to finish each story, but fortunately, they all have something players can latch onto. Even if the lack of an explicit overall plot didn't land for me, the individual stories are the most important part of the game. All 8 have merit and for the most part are entertaining. I do want to do a quick overview of, well, everyone, because the 8 travelers are what sell this game. I started with Ulbrich, an awesome knight who is also your classic downtrodden, honor-bound hero. He's a man without a country who used to nobly serve a king until everything was taken from him. Ulbrich wanders the land searching for the man who betrayed his kingdom. Then there's Alfin, who is on a quest to see the world and become the best apothecary he can be. Even though he's from a small town, he wants to pay back his mentor by saving lives any way he can. He's very versatile, good with crafting items, and healing party members. Therian the Thief is yet another man who's been betrayed. After a run-in with Destiny, he's tasked with finding 4 magical crystals that have a powerful unknown purpose. 4 crystals? In a RPG? The wonders never cease. Hanit is a hunter who is raised in a remote village. Her master has been missing for a very long time, so she gears up to find him. She can capture monsters to use in battle and wields bows and axes like she's some kind of fur-wearing combo of Legolas and Gimli. She also has the most bonkers speech pattern in the game, as she speaketh, liketh, thiseth, much of the time ith. It's very much like Ga or Gao from Final Fantasy VI. I say Ga, but everyone says Gao. I don't know, G-A-U. What do you guys think? The selfless Ophelia takes on a pilgrimage in her adoptive sister Steed. She's part of a religious order who serves the sacred flame and must travel the continent to perform rekindling ceremonies. She's also the closest thing we've got to a white mage here. Cyrus, the scholar, has one of the game's stranger beginnings. He's initially searching for a lost book with an ominous title, From the Far Reaches of Hell. Just a note for anyone listening, maybe don't seek out the demonically titled book, leave it where it is. Cyrus is essentially our black mage, wielding powerful elemental magic. Then we get to Primrose, who has one hell of a tragic backstory. She's a dancer searching for the men who murdered her highborn father, and who essentially becomes a victim of sex trafficking. She eventually slits the throat of the man controlling her to continue her journey of revenge. Outside of the dramatic arc of her story, her dancing grants powerful buffs to the party, and she can cast dark magic too. Finally, there's Tressa to round things out. She's a plucky merchant who just wants to see the world. Seriously, that's it. She finds a journal and is very inspired after reading it that she embarks on a trip. In battle, she's sort of an all-rounder. She has wind magic too and can hopefully donate boost points to other party members. Why not? You can imagine how this wide variety of plot lines and characters would have a hard time intersecting, and you'd be right. So they don't. Not really. Despite me thinking that some characters would really get along, character interactions are limited almost strictly to banter. Now don't get it twisted. Flavor and world building is always welcome, but the way banter is handled in Octopath struck me as pretty strange. Essentially, there are two types of banter. Some occurs after major plot beats in a chapter depending on who is in your party, and then there's also banter that appears in taverns. Triggering these little cutscenes may seem random, but it absolutely is not, and is determined by your party makeup, so you get a good bit of specific flavor throughout. The writing of banter is generally good. It actually allows these interesting characters to trade barbs and seem like, a real party of adventurers who kind of know each other, even though they don't. There is something fun about watching a party of misfits learn to care about each other. These 8 characters are all unique, and in each chapter, they have their own side characters and stakes. But I truly never felt like the party was a real party. It never feels like the group is rallying together to overcome specific obstacles. You kind of have to just let your imagination do all of the work to fill in the gaps. Octopath Traveler is basically a short story anthology, and that's great. On their own, these stories are solid, but you've got to set your expectations appropriately. There is not an inciting incident to kick off the adventure. Instead, each character has their own call to action. Eventually, a greater threat is revealed, but way later than you'd expect. Also, players cannot freely swap out party members whenever they want. You have to actually go to a tavern in a town and exchange who you want in your group. Now, to me, this further alienates the party from feeling like a party. It feels restrictive. For a game that lets you encounter story beats in a pretty fresh way, this choice feels very limiting. Every character is further defined by their path action, which every party member has. Some can be used outside of battle in towns, and others are useful for fighting or exploration. Alberic can challenge NPCs to a duel. Therian can steal stuff. Primrose can allure characters to follow her around. I love the idea of path actions, but they can cause a little dissonance when playing. For a fantasy world, Octopath Traveler feels like a world with real stakes, but path actions sometimes conflict with that. Being able to provoke almost anyone into a fight at any time feels so weird to me. Practically every NPC has at least one path action that affects them. Every time I visit a new town, I basically ran around cycling through every one of my path actions to every NPC I ever saw. Most of the time, this is a useful thing to do. Being able to find hidden items with Cyrus or Alphen is essential. NPCs occasionally block doors and must be defeated in a one-on-one fight by provoking or dueling them. Most side quests are completed by using the appropriate path action. However, there are really only 4 path actions despite there being 8 characters. Therian can steal items from NPCs, Tressa can purchase items from them. These are functionally the same mechanic. Basically, there's a light side version of a path action and a dark side one. But the rogue version doesn't really have a negative stake because you can restore your reputation at a tavern for little money. On one hand, path actions are an interesting way to give the player more tools to engage with the world. On the other, they feel sort of simplistic once you understand how they really work. All this is my roundabout way of trying to answer the question for myself. Is the story of Octopath Traveler good? I like the characters. I like the world. I think the conflicts in each story are exciting and even emotional. The writing is fine, occasionally even great. But I just never really got over the fact that the structure of this game is basically a bunch of short stories. I think maybe the team went a little too subtle, tying the whole experience together. It does get there. I just think it's weird how they do it. I may have found the narrative design of Octopath Traveler a little underwhelming. Fortunately, the grease that keeps the wheel turning is the battle system. Even though every chapter is only about an hour long, I was more than content to spend dozens of hours engaging in the intensely satisfying combat. Your mileage may vary on how the story lands for you personally, but you'll definitely find some more things interesting than others. Completing the story, however, is only a fraction of playtime once you factor in, the actual rest of the game. It's always funny to me how most RPGs are talked about in terms of story, when in reality, jrpgs are about making numbers go up. I can wax poetic all day about how the journey of Cloud Strife and his relation to Zack Fair and their identities are masterpieces of storytelling, when really, those are mere moments over the course of Final Fantasy VII and its franchise. In Octopath Traveler, we get 8 complete character arcs that span multiple locations, and yet, all that storytelling is minuscule in comparison to the time spent mastering the incredibly intricate combat mechanics and applying them to reach the endgame. Now you may ask yourself, What makes Octopath Traveler's battle system different from any other turn-based RPG? This game takes pretty much everything you know and love about other games in the genre and remixes them to a pretty great effect. Every enemy has a certain number of shield points, and dealing with that is the crux of combat. Shield points can only be reduced by hitting an enemy's weakness, and once that shield is broken, the enemy basically loses a turn. An enemy in break status is especially vulnerable to damage, so in every fight, the goal is to not just break the enemy, but to break the enemy when you are in a particularly advantageous position. But of course, breaking shields is only part of the fun. Remember like 20 plus minutes ago when I mentioned that some people who worked on this game also developed Bravely Default and Bravely Default 2? That influence is here with the boost mechanic. Every turn, party members gain boost points. You can spend boost points to, well, boost actions and improve their effectiveness. At first, boosting just feels like a damage buff, but it becomes the fulcrum that entire strategies swing on. Let's say a boss enemy has 5 shield points, and they're weak to axe attacks. Rather than plink away at the shielded boss for lesser damage, it's wise to spend some time buffing your characters using spells or items or defending to build up boost points. Then, when everything is lined up in the turn order, you boost up an axe wielder so they perform additional attacks, break the enemy's shield, and unload several boosted magic spells that the boss is also vulnerable to. Next thing you know, you're dealing 10,000 damage in a turn and the boss has been completely destroyed. Now, there is an achievement for dealing 99,999 damage in a single attack. And of course, at first, I thought this was impossible, but actually, once you level up your party appropriately, find some powerful weapons, and unlock some secret job classes, it's not uncommon to hit this damage output. It is incredibly empowering to break, boost, and blow enemies away in Octopath Traveler. You can muddle through the opening chapter or two for every main character with basic combat, using weapons to break shields and attacking elemental weaknesses with spells, but planning, setting up, and executing combos is where the power fantasy clicks into place. To pull off these combos, however, you need to go to school, by which I mean exploit every vulnerability of every enemy. This can be a very time-consuming process, especially the more powerful your party becomes. You'll want to try and get these vulnerabilities recorded ASAP, especially since some enemies are rarer than others, and some disappear entirely based on how much you've leveled up your group. I want to shout out a specific guide that I found very useful. The Octopath Traveler resource by Mark V666 helpfully broke down every single enemy and their vulnerabilities for me. It saved me a ton of pain and trial and error for boss battles. Even though there are usually save points right before a boss, fights themselves can take a really long time. Getting rocked over and over because I had to spend several turns trying out different weapons and elemental attacks just to find the enemy's weakness could be discouraging, especially because these fights would go on for forever. I was reminded of my time in Persona 5 with this particular mechanic. Learning weaknesses and how to exploit them is baked into the game, but this trial and error system certainly feels dated at times. I don't hate it, but after spending so much time on it for the completion process, I feel pretty damn drained. This is the part where I declare my love for Cyrus as one of the most helpful party members in regards to completion. Cyrus, the nerdy little bookworm, is super useful because he has an incredible talent: Study Foe. This reveals an unknown enemy's weakness at the start of a battle. Very helpful in the early game and takes some of the guesswork out of trying to expose an enemy's weakness or multiple weaknesses. You can also learn the skill Analyze, which can find even more enemy vulnerabilities, especially when combined with skills that target multiple enemies or trigger the move to activate more than once. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad I chose Ulbrich as my main protagonist at the very beginning of the game, but if you're new to this game and want to complete it efficiently, linking up with Cyrus as early on as you can will make every fight a little bit easier. Traversing the map and finding all 8 characters is crucial to cover weakness gaps and gives the player greater opportunities to experiment with party synergy. If every battle is a puzzle, I'd say the player doesn't have all of the pieces until the entire party is available. Some early battles can feel excruciating when you just have a single party member trading blows with 2 or 3 enemies. This situation luckily doesn't take that long to fix. Knowledge is truly power for Octopath Traveler's combat system, maybe more than any other turn-based RPG in a while. Knowing how to swing a battle in your favor by breaking and boosting is what makes it all work. that feels fun and is essential for completing this game. Chapter 3 and 4 bosses and the endgame content require you to know how to set off your own combos. You can still get pretty far with the basics, better equipment, and that old RPG chestnut of level grinding. And yes, after a certain point, you can spec out every character with a sub-job that supports their main class. This is a part of the game where freedom of expression comes into play. It's very fun to mix and match jobs and characters, trying to build a party that covers every possible situation you might come across. Combat is so refined that it makes up for most of the gripes I have about the stories running in parallel rather than intersecting. The endgame content is a true test that makes an effort to tie everything together, as well as provide a comprehensive exam for everything that completionists have learned over the course of the entire game. There's a reason I can only complete a JRPG every now and then on this channel. Most of the time, the requirements are pretty absurd and or time consuming. I've been plucking at Octopath Traveler for several months, and even though I'm having an alright time overall, I'd say after fully completing it that my satisfaction is a bit mixed. A lot of this comes from how Octopath Traveler handles its endgame. Real quick, mild mechanical spoilers coming up. Fully completing all 32 chapters is honestly not that complicated. It takes time, and the learning curve when you're trying to complete everything is a little steep. But once you master combat and know how to efficiently use path actions, making it through the game world is enjoyable. We finally completed the arcs of Ulbrich, Cyrus, Therion, Ophelia, Primrose, Alphen, Tressa, and Hanit, and oh my god, it spells Octopath when you line it up that way. Oh my god, it's Dead Space all over again. But that's not all there is to do. After the credits, the end game or post game or secret dungeon or whatever you want to call it becomes available. This area, the ruins of Hornburg, will test your mettle. Getting here requires the player to do a little legwork seeking out side quests that aren't completely obvious. Before heading there, you'll want to prepare by stocking up on items and leveling up as high as you reasonably can, because what's in front of you is an absolute brutal gauntlet of every hard boss in the game, which eventually leads to a battle against a god. And amazingly, story elements do eventually connect, in a way. In this very final area, you can find journal entries after defeating bosses that link NPCs from different character storylines to each other. Turns out there is a big bad who has been manipulating things behind the scenes this whole time. And true to form, this is a two-phase boss fight that just might determine the fate of the continent if your heroes fail. Galdera is one of those knockdown, drag-out battles that will push the limits of your patience and skill. Failing this fight means losing hours of progress and having to go through the entire gauntlet all over again. As far as final fights go, the Galdera battle is bombastic on every front. The music for this fight is extremely epic. Some of the best RPG music I've heard in a while. It serves as an excellent thesis to what high-level play looks like in this game and why it can be so satisfying. But I still can't get over that the grand mystery of how all the main characters should know each other is locked behind dozens of hours of gameplay and late-game lore literally stuck in diary entries. There's a short cut scene after you win this boss battle, but honestly, it's starring an NPC that I straight up forgot about. This scene isn't even fully voiced. Just a few lines of dialogue and a message about going on your own journey. Hey, I love an endgame challenge, but I didn't exactly finish the fight and feel accomplished. You are then rewarded with 100,000 monies and a spurning ribbon, equipment that turns off random encounters. Now there is one reward to indicate that you've done everything the game has to offer. The start screen changes, depicting a crown over the title Octopath Traveler. Now look, I love this kind of thing where you can turn on a game and see your efforts on screen. But since I still had Steam achievements to earn, the satisfaction was slightly diminished. The solo/speedrun can actually be pretty fun depending on which character you attempt to challenge this with. I had to make a plan and execute on it, picking a character with a wide range of abilities and decent skills outside of battle. I went with Tressa, who has access to most types of damage, meaning that I was almost always prepared for any type of enemy or boss. Her support skills, endless items, and hang tough give her crazy survivability. Plus, she's able to find extra money outside of battle, meaning that I could buy up equipment and items whenever I needed them without too much trouble. Even though I didn't have any other main party members, I could use her hired help ability to pay for NPCs to join battles, which was massively helpful during boss fights. Tressa may not be the strongest character who comes to mind, but doing this run with her was actually pretty fun, and it didn't take as long as I thought it would. The only reward here is an achievement, but it's still an enjoyable challenge if you want more out of Octopath Traveler. All told, I earned all 88 achievements. I completed all 101 side stories, and of course, 32 chapters telling the tales of my 8 travelers. This whole thing took me about 110 hours of playtime. And all told, at the end of the day, I'm glad I went on this journey. Octopath Traveler is gorgeous. If you buy into its storytelling, you're gonna have a wonderful time. The battle system is complicated yet fun, and feels more rewarding the longer the game goes on. I do wish the final rewards were a little more satisfying, but the world draws you in with its lush aesthetic. So, with that in mind, I give this game my completionist rating of finish it. And hey, maybe another 5 years, I'll complete Octopath Traveler 2. Thanks for watching, and if you want my thoughts on more RPGs, you can check out my more recent video on Crisis Core Reunion. Or, hey, buy the shirt, Embrace Your Beard, available now at thecompletionist.com. Thanks for watching, see you guys soon. Bye-bye!